Welcome to today's KM World webinar, brought to you by Swiftype. I'm Mary D. Ojala, Conference Program Director, Information Today, Inc., and I will be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled, 3 Ways to Optimize Search to Create the Best Online Self-Serve Customer Support Experience. Now, before we get started, I want to explain how you can be part of this broadcast. We will have a question and answer session, so if you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the Submit button. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response to it within a few days. If you would like a copy of the presentation, you can download a PDF from the resource icon at the bottom of the console once the event is archived. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Ben Lack is Senior Director, Marketing and Business Development at Swiftype, and David Kay is the Principal of DBK and Associates. To review speaker bios, just click on the arrow under the speaker's photo. So now let's move into today's presentation, and let me welcome Ben Lack, Senior Director, Marketing and Business Development at Swiftype. Ben.
Mary D., thanks so much for having me today and for everybody joining us. Really appreciate your time. As Mary D. said, my name is Ben Lack, and I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Business Development for Swiftype. For those that aren't familiar with our business, we're a site search company that's based in San Francisco. We were founded in January of 2013. We have a little more than $20 million in venture funding, and we're the largest independent search provider on the Internet. Collectively, we power over 500,000 websites and apps and are currently seeing a little over 4 billion queries per month. This is a sample of some of the customers that we work with: Hubspot, Shopify, Qualcomm, Marketo. This talk is certainly around customer support, but we also supply software for the publishing space, the corporate space, as well as for companies that have an e-commerce platform. Before I jump into the beginning of my talk, I want to quickly throw it back over to Mary D. to kick off a quick poll.
Right, and so what we'd like to know from you all is how you engage with customers today. Is it by phone, by email, chat or social, or self-serve? So while you're filling out your poll questions there, I thought you might be interested to know that of all the people we have attending the webinar today, we have people from Allstate Insurance, from Emblem Health, from Dell Computers, from Oracle, from General Motors. So it's a wide range of industries that we have represented today. How are we doing with our poll? Do we have poll results? And we do. Well, just look at that. Email, over half. Phone and self-serve seem to be tied, and absolutely nobody clicked on chat or social. So that's kind of intriguing. So Ben, what do you think?
So certainly good insight to see from everybody that phone and email are certainly common communication channels that teams are having with through customer support. But it's also nice to see that there's some folks currently on the call that are also using self-serve. And so what I want to do is just kind of reorient everybody around those 4 channels. This probably are things that you already are thinking about today, but want to give you just a few moments of space to kind of think about these again in the frame of how do we really optimize search to create a really strong self-service experience. So for the phone, when you're thinking about what kinds of interactions require one of your customers to actually want to call in, it's because they typically either aren't able to figure out a problem online or they actually need help solving a complicated problem, and it requires a back and forth on the phone. For the majority of you that are using email, I'm sure you'll probably agree that In many cases that you're finding longer resolution times, and that the resolutions can typically be more complex. If you look here to the right, I was able to find a sample email from an angry customer to the Postal Service, and they had paid for priority mail from San Francisco to the San Francisco airport, and they're arguing that they could have sent a turtle, put a package on a turtle and had the turtle get there faster. So certainly a much different dynamic, and I'm sure this probably resonates with some of your customer support teams. A growing channel that the customer support teams are starting to invest in is in the chat and social space. So platforms like Olark, where folks can chat in questions on someone's website, or social through Twitter or Facebook, and really having some type of a strategy around that to answer the easy to answer questions, and then for the ones that are complex, kind of taking that offline and addressing those either through phone or email. And then finally, self-serve. And this is kind of why we're doing this session today, because self-serve is a really rapidly growing communication channel that customer support teams are investing in. There's a recent study by Forrester that online self-service is now the most widely used customer service communication channel. And this is the first time that it's been number one, because phone typically handles the vast majority of engagements within a customer support team. So I'm going to pass the baton over to David to kind of talk a little bit about case deflection and engagement, and pass it over to you, David.
Great. Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. We are focused on the customer service, success, and support world, specifically around knowledge management best practices and self-service. And I think that the question that we asked in the poll, in fact, was a little bit of a trick question, an unfair question, because certainly in our client base, you're not just doing phone or chat or email or self-service. You're doing all of the above. And I think it's worth, when we're thinking about self-service as opposed to assisted channels, it's worth thinking about why we might do one sometimes and why we might do another time. And a good framework for thinking about this that I really like is from a book called The Best Service is No Service by Bill Price and David Jaffe. And their idea is that you really can categorize every interaction as to whether it is useful or not useful to customers and to the company. They call this the value irritant matrix. So things that are low value or irritating to customers are things that we should just really eliminate from the customer experience. We might do this by getting rid of it, by doing automation for things like password resets, or by improving the product or service offering. If it is something that is valuable to the customer, but we really don't see any value, we don't learn much by answering this question for the 3,000th time, this is the perfect time to use self-service. And then if an interaction is valuable both to us and the customer, we really want to take that in an assisted channel, right? We want to invest in these interactions. So often people think about self-service as contact deflection. I think about it more as a customer engagement strategy. This is the way that we're going to be able to focus our resources, our scarce and expensive humans, on things that are valuable to us as well as valuable to the customers. Another model that we use comes from the Consortium for Service Innovation, and it allows us to think about moving from an assisted model to a hybrid model with assisted and self-service. And the initial picture we have is really the traditional support organization. Customers have some kind of issue. They want to learn how to do something. They want help solving a business problem. The system doesn't seem to be working for some reason. And we've kind of constructed a funnel of a support center underneath them. So we've got level 1 people who are, nice people and they're good at fixing the customers, all the way to level 3 people that are really good at fixing the product, and maybe we might or might not want them to talk to customers so much. But in this environment, right, we kind of level 1 will handle the easy stuff, pass along a relatively small number, say only 20% of the inbound volume, to level 2, which will again solve 80%. Numbers like this are kind of what well-run support organizations look like. So if we think about this model, and we say, well, there's a lot of knowledge at level 2 and level 3 that we want to get out to level 1. Why don't we create a knowledge base and have people populate this knowledge base while they're solving customer issues? And that way we can move knowledge down to level 1, down to level 2. We can solve more issues earlier on. And that happens. That works. But the more interesting thing is what happens next. When we say, well, let's not just expose that knowledge internally. Let's take that same knowledge that our people have created for their own use and push it out to our customers through a self-service web experience. Right? Now you'll see there is some overlap from the perspective of the assisted support. It's a significant overlap. That is that self-service is handling some issues that before would have been assisted. And this is what it's really easy to get focused on, deflection, right? Call deflection, contact deflection. But really more interesting is the fact that we see not just some calls deflected, but we see an enormous number of contacts that we never would have heard about at all. And this is why the Forrester report, Kate Leggett's report that Ben mentioned a few minutes ago, to me was very interesting. Forrester's now seeing self-service taking over as the number one contact from assisted, but I think if you actually look at the data, it dwarfs assisted service. If you have an issue, what are you going to do? 9 times out of 10, you're going to Google it, or you're going to go onto a customer's self-service website and try and figure things out yourself. It's only if it's a high-severity issue and you absolutely need to get it fixed right away that you're likely to contact people. I mean, I think this Internet thing is going to take off. So the important thing about doing a great job with self-service and providing a great self-service experience on your website is not just that it deflects calls, although that's great, but the fact that you are satisfying an enormous demand for support that otherwise would have gone unsatisfied. And if you think about why support and service and success organizations exist, it's not really to close cases. It's to help customers receive and perceive value from the products and offerings that you're delivering, right? You are an intrinsic part of the value proposition, and self-service allows you to extend that out further. And of course, if we're able to do that, the nature of the work that comes into our support center changes. As more and more known issues are resolved in self-service, the ones that come in tend to be the really tough ones, the new issues, the things that we haven't seen. And that has big implications for how we organize our support organization. A number of our clients and other leaders in the industry who've been very successful with self-service find that old tiered approach doesn't really work anymore because they don't have repetitive, easy questions for Tier 1 to handle. So they move to a more of an opt-in collaboration or intelligent swarming model. Now, the story doesn't end with self-service. One of the other things that we can make searchable on our self-service website is customer forums, customer communities, people who are helping each other. And once again, yes, we will definitely deflect some contacts by doing this, but much more importantly, we're tapping into a rich vein of knowledge and business use case expertise that exists outside your company. I don't care what your company is or what it does. There are more smart people who don't work for you than smart people who do work for you. And peer support forums allow you to take advantage of that. So the cool thing about this model is that it means that we spend all our time focusing on the funnel. We spend all the time thinking about the people who work for us, the people whose paychecks we're writing every month. But maybe the thing to think about is not about how they close cases, but how it is that they're able to empower customers with knowledge and empower customers to help each other through self-service experiences to vastly increase the value footprint. So I like to say if you ever close a case and learn nothing else, well, you've missed an enormous opportunity. All right. So that's the business case for self-service. It's extending your reach. It's satisfying otherwise unserved demand for support. But sooner or later, the CFO is going to come into the room and say, yeah, I get all that, but how many contacts are you deflecting? And this is a hard problem. It's a hard problem because, well, sometimes the people who try to solve it are the vendors, and they want the numbers to be as high as possible. But fundamentally, it's a hard problem because you're counting something that didn't happen. So all we can do with deflection is estimate it and estimate the level of customer success. But the fact that it's hard doesn't mean that we can't do a good job of it. So I'd like to present a model, kind of walk you through how to think about success and deflection. I'll give you some specific formulas and techniques once we've built up the model. The first thing to think of is that there are really kind of two sorts of issues in the world, the ones that I'm going to open up a case about or contact you about, or the ones that I'm going to try solving on my own through self-service first. So the smaller one I'm saying contact first, the larger one, and our data really is that is much larger, is that people are going to try and self-serve first. It says web first on this, but that could be mobile, it could be anyway. So if we think about the people who are going to try and self-serve first, many of them, if they're not happy with their results, well, they're just going to go away and they're going to think less about you and your product. Right? They're not going to be able to unlock some of the value that they were hoping for when they purchased it. So that's not a good outcome, but it's an outcome. The other ones are the people who, they really need to get this issue solved. And these are the people who, if they can't get it solved, they're going to escalate. They're going to open up a case. They're going to contact you if they don't get it solved in self-service. Now, somewhat independent from whether people are going to escalate or not, they might or might not be successful. And depending on whose data you look at and what your online success rates for self-service, well, they're pretty discouraging, actually. They're generally somewhere between 40 and 50% in the benchmarks that I see, although they're obviously individual outliers. And this tends to be in high complexity worlds. It could be higher elsewhere. So between the people who might escalate and the people who are going to be successful online, if we kind of combine those, we can see most people, the people who are not on that bar, are either happy campers because they were successful, or they're a little bit disappointed because they were unsuccessful, but they're not going to move the needle in your contacts. The people who needed to get the answer resolved are now going to contact you. So I've labeled those as escalations. And of course, if you ask in the contact center, you can find out who these people are. The people who were going to contact you, but they were successful, so they didn't have to, well, that's the deflections. So now all we need to figure out who the deflections are and how many there are is to figure out how many people were successful and how many people were going to escalate. Let's look first at how to figure out how many people were successful. Before I do that, I should say that when people are opening up cases, you give them an option to see self-service results integrated into that experience in a non-obnoxious and a nice, helpful way. Then you also can count people who stopped opening a case or stopped contacting you, and those are de-escalations, and those are the kind of deflections that you really can count and take to the bank. So how are we going to figure out how many people are successful? Well, from what I've seen from the data I've gotten, if you pick something like 50%, in most cases you're not going to be far wrong. Better, though, is to ask users. Now, you can say, well, I put a little thing on my article that said, was this helpful, yes or no? That's great, but people so rarely click that, between 0.2 and 2% in our experience. But the non-response bias means you really can't extrapolate from that data. It's just they're not very representative of everybody. Now, there used to be, and frankly, for good reason, you don't see this very much anymore. There used to be these annoying pop-ups when you're trying to leave the website saying, was everything okay? Did you get? That just annoys users, so let's stop doing that. You can ask people in the support center if they had tried self-service first. I think the best thing to do, though, is just to pick up the phone and call some of your self-service users. Call 100. You can have some great conversations with them. You'll learn a lot more than these numbers. Now, if you ask people, when you came to the site last, why did you come? Were you successful in doing it? Well, that gets you your success rate. If they were successful, you can ask if they would have opened a case if they weren't successful. Those numbers tend to be a little suspect. The real gold number is, okay, you said you weren't successful, what did you do next? And if they said, yes, I had to contact you, then that'll give you that escalation rate, the percentage of people who are going to open a case if they're not successful. And between the two of them, you can get the answers you need. You can also do some sort of fancy Clickstream analysis. That's a little bit more advanced and a little bit less reliable. So I just like picking up the phone and talking to people. So if you know the escalation rate because you've asked people, you've got one formula for deflection. If you have asked people whether they contacted you before opening up a case, maybe you do this the first Tuesday of every month, then you know you use a different formula, a little bit of algebra too, but it's really that picture that you saw is what gets down to it. And I think people are often surprised at, relatively speaking, how few people are going to escalate. Not surprising that they're surprised, of course, because the people that they talk to are the people who call in, so it's a little bit self-selecting. So I know that algebra is not necessarily everybody's favorite thing in the middle of the workday, but you can go back and tell your ninth grade teacher that it was true. It came in handy, and I'll leave you these in the presentation if you want to go back and use them. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Ben to talk about how to make all of this stuff real.
All right, great. Thanks, David. So before we jump into how to make some of this stuff real, I want to provide everybody with two additional data points, at least from the user experience and then also from a financial side, both coming from the same Forrester study, which I really recommend everybody take a look at. The first is, which was pretty surprising to me, that 72% of customers today now are preferring self-service to resolve issues over some of the more common communication channels. And after having spoken to at least 15 customers myself, two of the reasons why what we're hearing from our customers is that, number one, the reason why this is the case is, number one, Google has really set the expectation that if people are going to be searching for something, they're going to be finding what they're going to be looking for. And the second reason that we're hearing from customers is that folks are having not the best experiences when they're communicating through email or phone, and so they'd rather just find the issue themselves. I'd also throw out that as we start to rely on more technology, and as technology has a larger relationship in the way that we communicate with each other, we're just going to be looking for faster answers and needing things really, really quickly. And we don't have time to send somebody an email or pick up the phone and wait on hold and try to get someone to help us out. So that hopefully that can provide some context for you to think about, how are you engaging with your customers. And then from a cost perspective, this was also a stat that was rather interesting to me. I've always known that the cost from email all the way up to call center support could be anywhere from $2.50 to $12 or more per engagement. But if you're really looking for some type of an ROI and business case that you need to bring to any of your teams at your business, you can share that the engagement is typically 10 cents or less for some type of a self-service experience. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Mary D. to ask another poll question, and then I'll provide some solutions for how you can leverage search and self-service.
Thanks, Ben. As you can see here, our poll is about satisfaction. How satisfied are you with your existing self-service customer support experience? And note that 1 is not very satisfied and 5 is very satisfied. So if you're very satisfied, you need to go down to the bottom of this screen here and click on 5. So also remember that we are going to be doing a question and answer session after the formal presentation. So if you do have questions, please put them into the question box, and click on the Submit button. And again, we will try to get to as many questions as we can during the webinar. But if your question has not been answered during the show, you will receive an email response to it within the next few days. So we should have some results here. Do we have poll results? We do. And okay, this is kind of interesting. We've got nobody who's really completely satisfied. Nobody. And it seems to hover 42, almost 43% in that mid-range. And I'm willing to bet that Ben's not terribly surprised by these results.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much what I expected. I'd be interested in anybody that's willing to share a little more insight. If you can chat through the question box, kind of, why you think your answer is a 1, 2, 3, or 4. That might help us be able to provide some suggestions for you, either in the Q&A or after the session. But this is definitely with what the kind of results that we're seeing with customers ourselves. So thank you for participating in that poll.
I just have to jump in here, Ben, that I know from the attendee list that we have several winners of the Association of Support Professionals 10 Best Web Support Sites on this conference. So if the people who are judged 10 best in the industry are still not completely satisfied with their support experience, it tells you just how high the bar is.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Thanks for jumping in with that. So let's frame the conversation around how to optimize search to create the best self-service customer support experience. So this is some data that we have pulled from ourselves, our existing database, and this is over 15 million queries, and this gives you a sense of the types of behavior that folks are using when they go to a self-service online experience and they start typing words or phrases into the search box. And so, back in the day, it might have been common for folks to be asking all sorts of, full phrase text questions or, shorter phrases to try to get the kind of content that they were looking for. But now, with numerous devices being available to people and the size of the box being variable, most of the engagement is going to be in 3 words or less, 94%. And this is a pretty important stat for folks that are thinking about search when it relates to self-service, what that really means. And so, the biggest takeaways from this data is that customers are going to explain what they want in only a few words. They're going to want it now and fast, so you need to make sure that once they've typed in their information that they're getting the results that they're looking for as quickly as possible, and then they want relevancy. They want it right the first time. So if you're going to have tons and tons of data points on user engagement, I'm sure many of you are tracking user engagement on your customer support site today, where should you start? And I'm going to argue that you really should be thinking about search, because the data that you get from search results provides you with intent data. And especially in a customer support experience, they're very specific into what somebody is looking for. And so it makes it much easier to be able to deliver them the content, the answers, any kind of troubleshooting help that they might need. So I'm going to walk through 3 very specific kind of characteristics of a search experience that if you're doing today, great, and think through some ways to make them even better. But if you aren't doing these things, try to incorporate them in the way that you think about search for your own website, because they really can not only improve the user experience, but also increase the satisfaction of your customer and really provide the value that your customer is looking for and that David was mentioning earlier. So for the first example is an autocomplete experience. So for those that don't know what autocomplete is, this is basically when you're in a search box and you start typing in whatever you're searching for, that a drop-down immediately appears and starts guessing what it thinks you want to be finding. And this can be done in a couple of ways. SurveyMonkey has done a really nice job here because they've taken a lot of the analytics that they've got with regards to search behavior and been able to, pick and choose the things that they want to be showing up in autocomplete. But it really gets that user to the content that they're looking for really, really quickly. One way that's been done in the past that's kind of becoming not as trendy is having autocomplete recommend specific search pages, whereas today these recommendations are driving people directly to specific pages themselves, the actual content. And in some instances, folks are showing multiple categories within the autocomplete and multiple different types of content. So there could be an example where you could have get started at the top and then troubleshooting or information around a community or some type of customer forum in the autocomplete as well. Again, being able to customize this is really kind of important in a way for you to not only create the value of your customer experience, but also bringing the value of your brand to your customer as well. The second thing that's worth taking a look at is your relevance model. And so I'm not sure if you have the ability to tweak your relevance models in-house, but it is becoming a trend that companies are now able to get that control to be able to identify what they think is the most important for not only them, but also for their customer, so that when somebody does search for something specific, they actually find what they're looking for. So Netflix is a good example here of how they're using social data to actually impact some of the results that they are that they're delivering to their customer. And they actually, per David's point, it's not a very strong data point, but they are using the yes/no question of is this useful or not. So certainly, if you do want to go down that route, you just need to know that that's not the strongest data point available in kind of the bag of tricks today, but it's certainly something that you can be looking at for super engaged users. And I'll get a little more into this, into how you can tune your relevance model in a few minutes. And then finally, no results is something that I think all folks that are on this session should really be taking a hard look at. It varies, but every site has search experiences that deliver no results whatsoever. And I'm sure many of you that are in this session have had that experience happen to yourself. And if you're in a customer support experience, this is the worst experience you can possibly have, because it's going to generate, lost value in your brand and your business, and also an immediate escalation. Because again, people don't have the time to go try to do additional searches or try to find things in another way. And so to be able to get the analytics to see, what types of queries are coming up with no results, and putting a plan in place for how to handle those queries is probably step one when you're thinking about how to optimize your search experience. And so Shopify, which is another customer of ours, has done a really good job of this, where they're taking that data and making sure that all of the queries that are delivering no results have some type of strategy behind them, so that the user is getting some type of content. So that's some things to think about. Let me kind of walk you through the how to make some of these things happen. So Swiftype, for us, the big focus that we really spend a lot of time on is giving our customers the ability to control and customize their own search experience in any way that they want. And so the way that we do that is kind of through three things. And the first is through result rankings. And so what result rankings are is the ability to recreate a query in your dashboard and see what the user is going to see, and then literally being able to click and drag a piece of content from one position to the next, or adding or deleting content to a specific query, so that you can really inform and have some control on what the user is going to see. And so the reason why this is important tool to be able to take advantage of is for a couple of reasons. Number one, there are many, many business cases that you're experiencing every day that an algorithm is never going to understand in real time. And so it's incredibly important to have a really relevant algorithm, but you're going to want to be able to override and tweak it in any way that you want so that you can support your business case. So if you have a bunch of new content that you really want to make sure gets high visibility, if you have new products or services that you're launching and you want to make sure that as new or existing customers are engaging with those products and services, that they're being able to find the self-service content that you want them to find, it's really important that you go in and pick those queries and bring that content and boost it to the top. And so being able to do this with a user experience for you that's super easy, literally clicking and dragging, is something that really will not only save you a lot of time, but help you feel empowered and give you the control that you need to really create a custom experience for the top 10, 20% of the queries that you're seeing come through your search box, because that's really the most engaged. Those are the most engaged queries. That's your low-hanging fruit, and that's where you can really create a custom experience. From the algorithm side of things, you can really start to see. There are a lot of tools that make things available for you to change the actual algorithm itself. And so what you're seeing here is our weights tool, which is essentially all of the metadata that we collect from your website. To take a quick step back, we index all of your content either through a web crawler or an API. And if you're using the web crawler or the API, we'll take that metadata that you provide us, similar to the metadata that Google has to index your own site for a global search experience, and give you kind of the keys to tweak the different types of metadata that you want boosted for your entire algorithm. So if, for example, you have some type of article review score that you want to that you're tracking, and you want to make the articles that get the most positive reviews to be showing up at the top for all of your results, then you can tweak your popularity impact score in weights and make sure that that really works out. A lot of folks are using social. Other folks are boosting, wanting to make sure that when somebody searches for something that word or phrase is in the title, and so that they want to boost that as well. And so as long as you give us metadata, you're then able to have that control to not only tweak these things, but also test them, and then in the future, very short future, create customer personas, so that if you have new users, you can deliver a specific experience, and then users that have been, or customers that have been with you for a while, you can deliver them a different type of an experience. So to be able to control that is really quite impactful. And then finally, just getting the analytics on what is going on with your search box is kind of really important, and something that's not very common today. And finding top searches with no results, top pages that are converting, those types of important detailed analytics are the types of things that will help inform you on how to create a better experience, and then help your content teams understand the types of things that your customers are searching for, so that you can either update and optimize content or go create new content for new initiatives. So with that, I'm going to pass it back off to Mary D. for any types of question and answers.
Thanks. Thanks, Ben. We did have two questions come in right at the very beginning, which I think have actually been answered, because they were complaining a little bit about our first poll and wondering if we couldn't have multiple choice there, being able to get more than one answer. But as David explained shortly after that, it was a bit of a trick question. So moving on from that, we do have a question. It's sort of a comment, so I think this is really for both of you. It's very challenging to derive self-solve statistics. Integrating a troubleshooting environment within knowledge search, retaining your customer's attention, is incredibly difficult. search will not always provide a definitive result. So it's a comment rather than a question. So Ben and David, which one of you would like to respond to that?
This is David. I'll take a whack at it, and then Ben can jump in as well. I fundamentally agree with the comment that it is hard to move the needle, and I think that's why we saw exactly 0 5s on the polling question earlier. That being said, I think there are things that we can do, and certainly in our work we've seen clients really move the needle. I mean, they tend to fall in really 2 buckets. One is the content itself, and the other is the experience for getting to the content. And Ben has been talking about ways of, for example, optimizing results for specific searches if you do a hill climbing process using some of the kinds of tools that he showed, or whatever it is that you have, and optimize for your top 50 search queries. You're going to cover a lot of ground by doing that. But a lot of it is the content itself, and a practice that we work on is called KCS, Knowledge-Centered Services, or Knowledge-Centered Support. The big idea at KCS is that every time that we take an issue in the support center, we're going to, that has something to do with knowledge, we're either going to reuse existing knowledge, we're going to capture new knowledge in the course of solving the problem, or we're going to update existing knowledge. So we're essentially always going to do one of those 3 things. And what you get as a result from that is a knowledge base that is up to date. If somebody's asked the question, there is a usable answer in the knowledge base. And over time, you sort of painlessly build up this collective repository of experience as a byproduct of just doing your work. And we find that although the initial target of these articles is other support engineers or other support analysts or services or success people, the initial target is internal, that you end up creating a really fabulous repository for people to then go and search. And if you couple that really useful repository that's up to date with good search technology that you've taken the time to tune and improve, you really can move the needle.
Ben?
Yeah, I want to echo that as well. I mean, we're a search business, and so we're providing tooling for an optimum, search experience. But we readily recognize that the relationship between search and content are pretty tightly knit and tightly woven together. And so we've actually spent quite a bit of time just talking to customers around how they're producing content, because you can still have the content you think your customers are going to want to find at the top of results, and customers might click into it because you might have a really meaty title. But if the content itself doesn't satisfy that customer's need, you're still not going to win. And so it's really, I think, a 2-part process where teams and companies really need to have a well-thought-out audit and then strategy that comes out of the audit for how to really deliver solid content, and then coupling that with making sure that people then find that content when they want it and doing it quickly is really kind of the final piece to the puzzle. One thing I will kind of say to the comment with regards to retaining customer attention is, we certainly recognize that there are many experiences in a self-serve customer support experience that's not just one page and exit, where there's the opportunity to actually consume numerous pages of content in a self-service experience, get the information you're looking for, and then leave a happy camper. And so we are in some testing today to actually generate recommended content on actual content pages based on click data and search data, so that we can personalize that experience for that user. We're certainly very much in the early stages, but we are taking a very hard look at that because we recognize that content and search are, the relationship between the two are so close to one another.
Mm-hmm. We have another question here. What tips do you have to ensure that your repository is current and up to date to reflect what people are searching for? And that sort of goes along with the question about search statistics. I'm assuming that statistics would play into making sure that your content is relevant.
Absolutely right. And I would say that there are kind of two paths. One, which KCS calls the solve loop, is in fact that process that every time somebody calls in, every time we contact, and knowledge is relevant, we're either going to reuse knowledge, mark that we've reused it, validate that it's still relevant and up to date. If it doesn't exist, well, shame on us, we didn't have the knowledge before, but by the time we're done, we do. Or we're going to, if the knowledge exists, but it's not exactly right, or it's not clear enough for this user, or this user used different search terms, for example, or ask about a different version, then we're just going to update it then and there. So every time we interact with a customer, we're keeping the knowledge base current based on what they've asked us and how we've answered it. Now, that's good for stuff that they're going to actually contact you about. But then there are the things that they won't contact you about that they'll only do through self-service. And Ben, I'll turn it over to you for how you identify those and fill those knowledge gaps.
Sure. So I'll give a good example. SurveyMonkey, their knowledge base team actually has a weekly stand-up. It's typically 15 to 30 minutes, and they are on a weekly basis looking at the search analytics, the top search queries, the top engaged content, the top searches with no results, and trying to just see if the trends are changing. And if they are, then they're pretty Johnny on the spot around auditing existing content to making sure that it's fresh and really up to date. The other suggestion I have, and this is coming from a company called Asana that we do business with, is they really think through kind of from like a beginner's perspective, kind of 101 content all the way to 201 and 301 content, and how does that get displayed to a user? In some instances, it's all on one page. In other instances, they've broken it up and made it numerous articles. And so when people are looking at content and saying, hey, is this stuff up to date? In many cases, it's based on the life cycle of the specific product or service that your business is delivering. And so a lot of times what will happen is a refresh will take place when a product is going through a new major update or a new product is just taking place, and that impacts the content that you've got on your website to make sure that everything is fresh and reflecting what people are searching for. If you don't have, SurveyMonkey has a very large customer support team because their business is really, really large, and so to them they felt like a weekly engagement with some stakeholders, it was the right frequency. For you, if you think that your team is smaller or you're not seeing as many support engagements, then certainly you can make that an every other week thing or a monthly thing, or kind of pick from there. But tactically, hopefully those are two suggestions that can help you.
Okay. As a follow-on question to that, how frequently do you find when you look at the queries that the answers are the same, but people's language used to describe something changes? Is that common or not common?
It depends on the use. It depends on the use case, but we actually see this quite frequently, and we have a tool actually in our dashboard called synonym sets where you can kind of tie words or phrases together and deliver specific search experiences. Because certainly if somebody searches for something, a car part, or let's say that you're you're a global business and that you're trying to serve numerous markets all over the world, somebody might in Europe might call something a little bit different than they might call something here in the States. And so you still want to be able to deliver very similar, or if not the same results to those folks, and so you can tie those similar like-minded words or phrases together to make sure that that experience is consistent.
I'd step back a little bit and say that there are kind of two levels at which you get different language. One is the sort of the synonym level where, depending on where you are in the world, you might say wrench or spanner or, trunk or boot. And those things are really well handled by the tools. A trap that we see people falling into sometimes is adding a keyword section to the bottom of their content and saying, now the poor person who captured this content or who authored it now has to guess, all the other words that somebody might use for this same thing. And really, you don't want to do that. You want to let the tool and a sort of a synonym or concept capability handle that. There's another kind of thing which is not really about the language that's used, but is about the concept. So you can have an underlying issue, say with the technology, that if something goes wrong, it could show up in one of 20 ways, right? All of my clients have these things where, if this goes wrong, you can notice there's a performance problem. You can notice that there's an error. You can notice that this report isn't getting generated. Same problem, but different people will have different customer experiences, and so they'll ask about it in different ways. And really with that, there's no sort of synonyming around that. Just over time, as people use the content, they have to say, this is another way that same problem can show up, and literally just put it in the content. The way I like to think about it is if you're creating content to be searched, every word should count. Every word should be a keyword. Let's not have play guessing games and have a separate keyword field.
And we agree. We agree. Certainly you can if it makes you feel good, but there's technology out today that makes sure that your results are going to be as relevant as they possibly can based on the content you're already generating today. So save yourself the time and just really focus on producing high-quality content.
Okay. We have another question here. Any suggestions about how to get content from other sites into my self-serve platform?
Sure. Let me take this one. So kind of as David mentioned, you certainly are thinking about the self-service customer experience just from people going to your help center or customer support center on your website. But David gave some good examples of where the engagement online is also taking place in a really high clip, and that's with customer forums and customer communities. And so what's important about making sure, kind of where search can play a nice role from an experience perspective is not only being able to tie in just what's going on with your website, but also being able to tie in additional sites as well, and really creating a federated search experience so that, if someone goes to the corporate site and starts typing into the box and you're getting an autocomplete, or someone actually hits enter and gets to a search results page, that you can actually deliver content from the forums, the communities, as well as your help center as well. And then, again, with the flexibility and control, curate what that needs to look like for you and your business to make sure that your customer is finding what they're looking for. And we're finding that having a federated experience is becoming a trend in the customer support space, because there are so many different touch points digitally that businesses are having with their customers, and they don't want to have this siloed experience anymore. They really want to be able to have a much more comprehensive 360 delivery. So hopefully that's helpful.
David, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that stands on its own. That's great.
Okay. Our next question here is a little bit of a case study. We provide mission-critical infrastructure for our clients. There's no way they're going to search on the web 10 times as often as opening up cases, especially since they're paying a ton of money for the right to pick up the phone and call us. And they know they get excellent support when they do. So what's that ratio for companies like ours? David?
I'm still going to stick with my 10-to-1 number. I think it's. I hear kind of this sort of pushback a lot, and I've had some awkward moments, as this may be a little bit, with a VP of support who is who's making this observation, and absolutely people are paying a lot of money for support. People, if there's a hard down or there's a big issue or they can't do something, absolutely they'll pick up the phone, they'll open the case, they'll go online, whatever they need to do to get it resolved. But there are a lot of other kind of situations where, well, maybe people won't. And one thing about, IT folks in particular, engineers, business users, nobody wants to feel dumb. And it's almost inevitable that if you have to ask another human being for help, it maybe doesn't make you feel so wonderful. And the other thing about it is that there's a lot of stuff that people would like to figure out how to do, but they don't really need to. This is not a mission critical example, but I think it gets at the type of thing. I was talking with a guy who ran support for a company that made, among other things, mice for computer, pointing devices for computers. And he said, we sell these a mouse with 7 buttons on it, right? And if somebody can't figure out how to work the 7 buttons and how to get it set up with his computer and stuff, they're not going to call support and wait on hold. They're going to use the regular 2 buttons, and then next time they're probably going to buy our competitor's mouse. So really a lot of it are these issues that you just don't see and hear precisely because they're the kinds of things that people aren't going to open a case about or aren't going to call about. It's sort of the silent majority.
That sounds like
and I would actually just
for Selfserve with a picture.
Yeah, and I would actually just throw in 2 points, the additional points. The first point is, even though you have the ability in that use case to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, there's no guarantee that that person's able to pick up immediately, on the other side of the phone. And so if you really have a time-sensitive issue and it's not overly complex, or maybe it is, and your business is able to create a self-service experience, with content that can satisfy those issues, then having that available online for those use cases is important. The second thing I would kind of throw out there is that, in some instances, when you're offering that kind of a support, it's because there are multiple stakeholders across your customer that are going to be interacting with you. And so some of those stakeholders are going to absolutely need to be able to call you because of a specific use case, and others aren't. And even though it's important that everybody has that ability, that doesn't necessarily need to be the case for everybody. So I could see that also being a reason for those people being like, I don't necessarily need to call because I'm not the boss, or something like that. I can just go online, get the answers, and then roll it up to my boss as well. So just 2 other. Certainly, I don't think that's like the norm by any means, but just 2 other edge cases that are worth considering when you're thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, that is all the time we have for questions today, and we do apologize if we were unable to get to all the questions, but as I mentioned earlier, any questions that we didn't get to on this webinar will be answered via email. So I'd like to also, if you want to view the archive on this, if you want to review it, send it to a colleague, use the same URL that you used for today's event. It will be archived for 90 days. And you should receive an email tomorrow with the URL to view the archive. So I'd like to move on to tell you that just for participating in today's event, you could win this Chromecast. So winner will be announced on December 18th. If you go to kmworld.com, you will see if you are a winner. And I would now like to thank very much our presenters today, Ben Lack, Senior Director, Marketing and Business Development with Swiftype, and David Kay, Principal with DBK and Associates. Thanks to both of you.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.